Welcome, dear friends, to a tale of love, redemption, and second chances. Enjoy the story. Courtney Johnson stared out the grimy window of her cramped studio apartment. The peeling paint and water-stained walls, a stark reminder of just how far she had fallen. At 28, life had dealt her a series of devastating blows, leaving her with nothing but painful memories and shattered dreams. Growing up in the foster system, Courtney bounced from home to home, never knowing the love and stability every child craves. Her teen years brought a glimmer of hope when she fell head over heels for bad boy Jake, believing she had finally found her happily ever after. But that hope was swiftly crushed when Courtney found herself pregnant and alone at 16, Jake taking off the moment she revealed the news. "I can't deal with this, Court. It's over," he had said coldly before walking out of her life forever, leaving Courtney to face the daunting challenges of single motherhood. Though times were tough, Courtney cherished every moment with her baby boy Matthew, vowing to give him the loving home she never had. But fate had other plans. Desperate to keep food on the table, Courtney made a fateful mistake, shoplifting diapers and formula from the local supermarket. She was swiftly arrested and sentenced to a year in county jail, forced to watch helplessly as Matthew was wrenched from her arms and placed in foster care. "Please, you can't take my baby, he needs his mama," Courtney cried as the social worker drove off with a wailing Matthew strapped in the car seat. That gut-wrenching image haunted Courtney's every waking moment during her incarceration. Now, freshly released and determined to turn her life around, Courtney took a dead-end job as a janitor cleaning the streets of a posh neighborhood in the wee hours. It was demeaning work, but Courtney knew she had to start somewhere if she ever hoped to get Matthew back. Tears streamed down her face as she swept the littered sidewalks, the mansions towering above a cruel reminder of the life that had been ripped away from her. Courtney felt powerless against the system, her criminal record a scarlet letter dooming any chance of regaining custody. But still, she refused to give up hope. "One day, my angel, Mama's gonna make things right and bring you home where you belong," Courtney whispered to herself, clutching the heart-shaped locket containing Matthew's photo. It was a promise she intended to keep, no matter what it took. Little did Courtney know, a twist of fate was about to change her life forever. Courtney trudged along the dimly lit street, her aching muscles protesting the long shift of physically taxing labor. She glanced at her watch, 1:03 a.m., another late night keeping her from Matthew. As she neared the sprawling estate on the corner, a scuffle in the shadows caught Courtney's eye. Two hooded figures had a man pinned against his car, the glint of a knife unmistakable in the orange glow of the streetlights. "Hand over the Rolex and wallet, rich boy. Don't make me ask twice," the taller of the muggers growled, pressing the blade against the man's throat. The victim, appearing to be in his late 20s and dressed in an expensive suit, trembled in fear. For a split second, Courtney froze, considering turning a blind eye. Getting involved could land her right back in a jail cell. But as the young man whimpered, his terrified eyes meeting hers in a silent plea, Courtney knew she couldn't just walk away. With a surge of adrenaline, Courtney charged forward, wielding her broom and dustpan as makeshift weapons. "Hey, leave him alone!" she yelled, swinging the broom at the armed assailant. Caught off guard, the mugger yelped in pain as the broom connected with his shoulder, causing him to drop the knife. His accomplice lunged at Courtney, but she deftly sidestepped, slamming the dustpan into his face with a sickening crunch. The would-be robbers, realizing they had met their match, scrambled to their feet and fled into the night, their victim's blood spattering the pavement. Courtney hurried to the man's side as he slumped against the car, visibly shaken. "Oh my God, are you okay? You're bleeding," Courtney gasped, grabbing her cleaner's rag to dab at the cut on his neck. The man looked up at her, a mix of relief and amazement in his eyes. You saved my life," he stammered. "I don't know how to thank you, Miss..." Courtney Johnson," she replied, helping him to his feet. "And no need to thank me. I'm just glad you're all right, Mr. Preston. David Preston," he said, extending a hand. "Really, I insist on repaying you somehow. You're a hero, Courtney." Courtney shook her head, a rueful smile on her lips. "I'm no hero, Mr. Preston. Trust me. I I was just in the right place at the right time. David studied her intently, sensing there was more to this brave woman than met the eye. At least let me give you a ride home. It's the least I can do. Though every instinct screamed for her to decline, Courtney found herself nodding. As she climbed into the plush leather seat of David's BMW, she couldn't shake the feeling that this chance encounter had just set something momentous in motion. For the first time in years, a flicker of hope ignited in Courtney's battered heart. Courtney fidgeted nervously in the elevator, tugging at the frayed hem of her second-hand blouse. After David had insisted on dropping her off at her run-down apartment complex that fateful night, he had pressed his business card into her hand with a promise to keep in touch. Now, just a few days later, Courtney found herself ascending to the top floor of Preston Industries, David's multi-million-dollar company. He had called her out of the blue, saying he had an opportunity he thought might interest her. The elevator dinged, the doors sliding open to reveal a sprawling high-tech office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the cityscape. David, looking every bit the polished executive in his tailored suit, greeted her with a warm smile. "Courtney, I'm so glad you could make it," he said, ushering her into his glass-walled conference room. "Please have a seat." Courtney perched on the edge of a sleek leather chair, feeling woefully out of place amidst the opulence. "Mr. Preston, I appreciate you reaching out, but I'm not sure what I'm doing here. I mean, I'm just a janitor." David held up a hand, cutting her off. "First of all, please call me David. And second, you're not just anything, Courtney. What you did for me that night was extraordinary. It took guts and heart." He slid a folder across the table, his expression earnest. "Which is why I want to offer you a job here at Preston Industries, as my personal executive assistant." Courtney's jaw dropped, certain she had misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "David, I don't have any experience in the corporate world. I barely finished high school." "I know talent when I see it, Courtney. You're smart, resourceful, and unafraid to take action when it matters most." "I can teach you the rest," David insisted. "This is a chance to turn your life around, to build a future for yourself and your son." At the mention of Matthew, Courtney's eyes welled with tears. "You don't understand. I lost custody of my baby when I was in prison. They'll never let me get him back with my record." David leaned forward, his gaze intense. "What if I told you there might be a way? A way to not only get your son back, but to give him the life he deserves?" Courtney stared at him, hardly daring to breathe. "What do you mean?" "Marry me, Courtney." The words hung in the air, the silence stretching between them. Courtney shook her head in disbelief. "David, that's crazy. We barely know each other." "Hear me out," David pleaded. "It would be a marriage on paper only. But think about it. As my wife, you'd have access to the best lawyers, a stable home, a respectable job. No court could deny you custody then." Courtney's mind reeled, the possibility of holding Matthew in her arms again almost too much to fathom. Could she really pull off a sham marriage to get her son back? Was it worth the risk? As if reading her thoughts, David reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "I know it sounds insane, but I want to help you, Courtney. You saved my life. Now let me save yours." Courtney closed her eyes, picturing Matthew's cherubic face. In that moment, she knew she would do anything, sacrifice anything, to be his mother again. "Okay," she whispered, meeting David's gaze with determination. "Let's get married." The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind as Courtney and David enacted their plan. They wed in a quiet civil ceremony at the courthouse, exchanging vows with an officiant and a pair of strangers serving as witnesses. Though it was all for show, Courtney couldn't help but feel a flutter in her chest as David slipped the simple gold band onto her finger. True to his word, David set Courtney up in a lavish apartment just a few floors below his own penthouse. He spared no expense in furnishing it, insisting she have all the trappings of a wealthy man's wife. Courtney marveled at the luxurious surroundings, a far cry from the squalid studio she had called home for so long. At the office, Courtney threw herself into her new role as David's assistant, determined to prove she was worthy of the chance he had given her. She stayed late poring over contracts, memorizing every detail of David's schedule, fetching his coffee just the way he liked it. 2 sugars, splash of cream. Though the learning curve was steep, Courtney found she had a knack for the work, her street smarts translating well to the cutthroat world of business. As the days turned to weeks, Courtney and David fell into a comfortable rhythm, the lines between their professional and personal lives beginning to blur. Late nights at the office turned into shared takeout dinners, shop talk giving way to deeper conversations about their hopes and fears. David opened up about the immense pressure he felt to live up to his father's legacy, to prove himself worthy of the Preston name. Courtney, in turn, shared the painful details of her past, the abandonment, the struggles, the mistakes that had cost her everything. "I just wanted to give Matthew a better life than I had," she confessed one evening over a bottle of Merlot, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "But I failed him. I failed as a mother." David reached across the couch, his fingers grazing her cheek as he brushed away a stray tear. "You didn't fail, Courtney. You did what you had to do to survive. And now you're fighting like hell to make it right. That's the mark of an incredible mother." Courtney leaned into his touch, a shiver running down her spine at the contact. She knew it was wrong, that their relationship was supposed to be strictly business. But with each passing day, she found herself drawn to David in ways that had nothing to do with their arrangement. As if on cue, David's cell phone buzzed, shattering the moment. He glanced at the screen, his brow furrowing. "It's my father. He wants me to come to dinner tomorrow night. Apparently there's someone he's dying for me to meet." Courtney felt a pang of apprehension. "Someone?" David sighed, running a hand through his chestnut hair. "If I know my father, it's probably the daughter of one of his business associates. He's been dropping hints about finding me a suitable match for months now." "Oh," Courtney said softly, a sudden tightness in her chest. "Well, I guess you should go then. Wouldn't want to disappoint your dad." David stood abruptly, pacing the length of the living room. "Damn it, Courtney, don't you get it? The only person I want to be with is you. This whole fake marriage thing, it stopped being pretend for me a long time ago." Courtney's heart thundered in her ears, scarcely believing what she was hearing. "David, what are you saying?" He crossed the room in 2 strides, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. "I'm saying I love you, Courtney Johnson, and I want our marriage to be real. No more pretending." Before Courtney could respond, David's lips were on hers, kissing her with a desperate, hungry passion. She melted into his embrace, all doubts and fears falling away as she lost herself in his touch. In that perfect, shining moment, Courtney allowed herself to believe that happily ever after might just be possible after all. But lurking in the shadows, forces were at work that threatened to tear their newfound love apart. Courtney nervously smoothed the skirt of her emerald cocktail dress, her heels clicking on the marble floor of the Preston family estate. Beside her, David squeezed her hand reassuringly as they approached the door, a grim expression on his face. "Just remember, no matter what happens in there, I love you," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "We're in this together." Courtney nodded, drawing strength from his words as the door swung open, revealing a ramrod-straight man with steel-gray hair and piercing blue eyes. David's father, Paul Preston. "David," he said coolly, his gaze sliding to Courtney, "and you must be the mystery woman my son has been keeping hidden away." "Courtney, was it?" Courtney extended a hand, forcing a smile. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Preston." Paul ignored the gesture, turning on his heel and striding into the opulent living room. "Wish I could say the same. David, a word?" David shot Courtney an apologetic look before following his father, their voices low and tense. Courtney hovered awkwardly in the foyer, feeling like an intruder in her own life. "David, what the hell were you thinking? Running off and marrying some girl from the streets?" Paul hissed, his face mottled with rage. "Her name is Courtney, Dad." "And I love her," David retorted, his jaw clenched. Paul scoffed, shaking his head in disbelief. "Love? Don't be naive, son. Love has no place in our world. Power, money, status, that's what matters. Which is why I've arranged for you to marry Veronica Harding." "Veronica? The daughter of your business partner?" David sputtered, his eyes widening. I'm not some pawn for you to manipulate, Dad. I make my own choices. Not if you want to inherit the company, you don't, Paul snapped. I've worked too hard building this empire to watch you throw it away on some gold-digging tramp. At that, David saw red. He grabbed his father by the lapels, slamming him against the wall. Don't you ever speak about my wife that way again, he growled, his voice low and dangerous. Paul stared at his son in shock, a flicker of fear in his eyes. In all their years of butting heads, he had never seen David like this. Raw, primal, a man willing to risk everything for the woman he loved. You listen to me, Dad, David said, his grip unwavering. Courtney is the best thing that's ever happened to me. She's kind and brave and strong as hell. And if you can't see that, then that's your loss. But I won't let you or anyone else come between us. Not now, not ever. With that, David released his father, straightening his suit jacket. He turned to Courtney, who had watched the exchange with wide, disbelieving eyes. Let's go home, he said softly, taking her hand. As they walked out into the night, Courtney leaned into David's side, her heart swelling with love and gratitude. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There were still battles to be fought, prejudices to overcome. But with David by her side, she felt invincible. Courtney paced the length of the courthouse hallway, her heart hammering in her chest as she awaited the judge's decision. Beside her, David held her hand tightly, his presence a steadying anchor in the sea of uncertainty. The past few months had been a whirlwind of legal battles as Courtney fought to regain custody of her beloved Matthew. With David's support and the help of a high-powered attorney, she had built a strong case, arguing that her marriage and stable job at Preston Industries proved she was more than capable of providing for her son. But now, as the seconds ticked by with agonizing slowness, Courtney couldn't shake the fear that it might not be enough, that the mistakes of her past would forever haunt her, denying her the chance to be the mother she longed to be. Just as the waiting became unbearable, the courtroom doors swung open. Courtney's lawyer emerged, a smile breaking across her face. "We did it," she said, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "The judge granted you full custody, Courtney. You can take Matthew home today." Courtney let out a sob of pure relief, collapsing into David's arms as the weight of years of pain and longing lifted from her shoulders. He held her close, murmuring words of love and congratulations into her hair. Hand in hand, they entered the courtroom, where a smiling social worker waited with a squirming, babbling Matthew in her arms. At the sight of his mother, the toddler let out a delighted squeal, reaching for her with chubby hands. "Oh, my sweet baby," Courtney breathed, scooping him up and burying her face in his soft curls. "Mama's here. Mama's finally here." David watched the reunion with misty eyes, his heart swelling with love for the woman who had stormed into his life and changed everything. He knew in that moment that he wanted nothing more than to spend the rest of his days by Courtney's side, raising Matthew as his own and building the family they had both been denied for so long. As they walked out of the courthouse and into the bright sunlight of a new day, Courtney felt a sense of peace wash over her. For so long, she had been running from her past, certain that happiness was a luxury she could never afford. But now, with her son in her arms and the love of her life by her side, she knew she had finally found her place in the world. 1 year later. The Preston family estate was ablaze with twinkling lights and laughter as Courtney, David, and little Matthew made their way up the winding drive. In his grandmother's arms, Matthew cooed and babbled, his eyes wide with wonder at the sparkling display. At the door, Paul Preston greeted them with a warm smile, the once cold and calculating businessman, now a doting grandfather. Though the road to reconciliation had been rocky, Paul had come to see the error of his ways, recognizing the true love and devotion that bound David and Courtney together. "There's my favorite grandson!" he boomed, sweeping Matthew into a bear hug. The toddler giggled with delight, tugging at his grandfather's beard. Inside, the family gathered around the Christmas tree, sipping hot cocoa and sharing stories of the year gone by. As Courtney watched Matthew tear into his presence with unbridled glee, she felt a sudden wave of emotion overtake her. "I have one more gift to share," she said softly, her hand resting on her stomach. David, Matthew, you're going to be a big brother and a daddy again. The room erupted into chaos as David leapt to his feet, whooping with joy and twirling Courtney in his arms. Matthew, not fully understanding but caught up in the excitement, clapped and cheered, bouncing on his grandfather's knee. And as the Preston family celebrated the new life that would soon join their ranks, Courtney felt a sense of completeness wash over her. For so long, she had been searching for a place to call home, a family to call her own. And now, in the warmth and love of this moment, she knew she had found it at last. Courtney Johnson had once been a lost soul, adrift on the tides of fate. But through the power of love, resilience, and second chances, she had rewritten her story and created a legacy that would endure for generations to come. And as she stood hand in hand with the man who had become her rock, her soulmate, and her partner in all things, Courtney knew that this was just the beginning of their happily ever after. For true love, in the end, always finds a way.